using. We've talked about housing authorities, incentive programs, transit, and so much more. And we've been able to feature communities across the state, bringing us. We've had all across the state, from the West Coast, from the West Slope, Front Range, up and down. So, um, and that brings us to our presentation today on modular housing. So we'd like to thank you all for joining us for the 12th in this series. Thank you for staying with us all this time. So before we get into our topic today, we're just going to go through a few quick announcements, and then we'll get into our speaker presentations, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion and Q&A at the end. So first up is funding opportunities. And Robin, I'm going to turn that over to you.
Lisa, good morning. We have announced the next funding cycle of the Prop 123 Local Planning Capacity Grant. That funding cycle opens May 1st with an application deadline on the 30th. That is one opportunity we wanted to bring to your attention. Just related to that, I wanted to share that we also just announced DOLA now has incentives, we'll call them awards, for communities that adopt fast track early by the end of December 2025. And if your community does that and submits your adopted fast track policy to DOLA, you're eligible for $50,000 in grant funding with no match. So that's exciting news. And this grant program can help you achieve that. Related, we have DOLA's Housing Planning Grant Program, which just announced their dates for the next funding cycle. One just closed. This grant program can help with housing action plans, housing needs assessments, and the strategic growth element to your comprehensive plan that's now required. Will soon be required. Those funding dates actually are June to July, but specifically June 6th through July 11th would be the application deadline. So more details on that. Let's see, briefly, I also wanted to share, Lisa, you want me to just keep going on the next topics here?
Sure.
We've got the ADU grant program, excuse me, the ADU Academy that is happening in Denver. You can become a certified ADU professional. That takes place in June. Speaking of training opportunities, the University of Denver has a great program for, it's a year-long program with an application deadline coming up in late May for next fall and spring. And then the one more important announcement is that DOLA is partnering with Enterprise Community Partners to update the Affordable Housing Toolkit for local elected officials. And apparently I've got too much text to paste. Let's go with that. Alrighty. So we're looking for your input. If you have experience with homelessness resolution challenges and solutions, please chime in on this survey and help DOLA as they develop the latest module on homelessness to support policymakers across Colorado. And Lisa, I think, the best practices on parking management is the last one. And apparently, again, my description's too long. Here we go.
So it's the webinar will provide an overview of the new parking minimum requirements, and we'll also go over the best practices report.
Great. So I think we've covered all the announcements we had. If anyone has other important or useful announcements you think this audience would like to learn about, please paste them in the chat and share. This is an opportunity to learn from each other. All right, Lisa, back to you on upcoming.
Thank you, Robin. So today we're going to be talking about modular and offsite construction, but we do have the next couple of months lined up as well. So next month on May 15th, we'll be changing up our format a little bit and doing a roundtable about fast track. And then in June, we will be talking about ADUs and some of the resources around that. So today, we will be talking about SB 25, the regional building codes for factory built structures that is pending in legislature right now. And then we're also going to learn about the Sawtooth project in Gunnison County. So with us today, we have Malid Miskell, our deputy director here at DOLA, and he'll be sharing the information about the legislation. And then John Cattles and Kathy Pagano are here from Gunnison County, and they'll be telling us about Sawtooth. So welcome, everybody. Mo, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Lisa, do you mind if I present? Perfect.
Yes, please.
Question is, do I have the capability?
You should.
Awesome. All right. Let's see if I can find it now. You guys see my slide deck?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, but it's, yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
All right. Great. It's so good to see so many familiar faces and names. Faces for those of you brave enough to turn your camera on. For those of you who do not know me, this is my 8th year at DOLA, coming on finishing up my 8th year here. And I've had a variety of positions here at DOLA. Currently, as Lisa mentioned, I'm the Deputy Executive Director for DOLA, fairly new to that position. Prior to that, I was with Division of Housing and had several roles there. But one of them, my first role, was managing our statewide modular program. So as you can imagine, when products are being built off-site, whether in a different jurisdiction or even another state, and even in some cases another country, and they arrive in a local jurisdiction, local government's jurisdiction, we want to make sure that those things are built appropriately to code and are safe to occupy without tearing them apart to find out how they're built. And so we've had a statewide program for 54 years, I think, if memory serves me right. And it's been housed with the Department of Local Affairs, specifically Division of Housing. So thank you, Robin and Lisa, for the invitation to talk about this. Even though my role has changed, I love to geek out on modular. All right, so as Lisa mentioned, we have an important bill that's going through this legislative session. And I'm happy, well, actually I'll talk about that later. It has several primary features to it. The biggest one, thus the title of it, Regional Building Codes for Factory Built Structures. And by the way, factory built structures is a term in our statute. And when you hear modular homes, they are considered factory built structures. So basically, and it's not just residential. We also do non-residential as well. So anything that's built off-site, it arrives in such a fashion where the local building department cannot tell how it was built. So the plumbing, electrical, mechanical, insulation, all that stuff is covered. That would come through this program. If it arrives in such a state where they can see it, so some of those things were done off-site, but it wasn't closed, for example, open panel construction, that's up to local governments. That doesn't come through our statewide program. So the whole idea, the concept of this is to be able to do what the locals cannot readily do. So similar to the federal government with how they regulate HUD code manufactured homes, but a different product. These are built to different codes, but similar process, if that makes sense. So currently, the vast majority of the codes are established through our statewide program and through adoption through our state housing board. However, there are specific exceptions in statute, which is unique to Colorado when compared to other states. And they really are accounting for unique climatic and geographic conditions. So think wind load, snow load, Wildfire risk was a more recent one that was added through statute. So the idea behind this is instead of having this program and of course the manufacturers of this product have to account for potentially over 300 different variations of those unique requirements to create a consolidated effort here. And that's the primary driver of what Senate Bill 2 is trying to accomplish. And the way it does that is through an advisory committee. The advisory committee was 15 members, it's been around for decades. Through this bill, that membership will be increased to 19 members to accommodate different interests, both on the industry level and of course on the regulatory level, specifically local government and other state agencies that are very much interested in this product type and its construction and deployment across the state. That advisory committee will be working on this consolidated effort of those handful of codes that right now are deferred to local governments to try to bring simplicity to it and consistency. And it cannot enforce whatever it creates. It can only recommend those codes to the actual authority body, in this case, which is the State Housing Board, which I mentioned earlier. So once, and of course, by law, not of course, but the bill requires that the State Housing Board, whatever it adopts, is in effect by July 1st of next year, which means working backwards, the advisory committee would have to notice proposed rules through the Division of Housing by the end of March 2026, for those of you that are very interested in this and want to calendar those important events. The other part of the bill, and this has been allowable and ongoing for a long time, is our partnership with local government on the inspection side of things. As you can imagine, we don't have an army of inspectors to cover the whole state, even though it's a statewide program. And so we really rely heavily on local governments to assist with it, even though the statewide program provides the codes in which enforcement needs to follow. We can't do it all ourselves. So partnership with local government is important. We also utilize third parties as well that operate nationally. So this will hopefully expand that partnership with local governments as well. And just so you know, even if this bill does not pass, although I'm pretty confident it will, and I'll get to that later, just the conversations we have had with local government and others about the program and just helping educate and elevate what the program has actually been doing for decades has been huge. It's amazing how much misunderstanding there really was about this program. And I mentioned third parties. So another piece of this is third-party plan reviews. So right now the process is all plan reviews for modular construction, not the foundations, that's with local government, and any other site work not specific to the construction of the structure and its installation. All that's with local government, but the construction and installation of the product, that's with us, comes through us. Third parties can review it, but the final approval is with us. This bill allows for an opportunity for final approval for third parties. We would, of course, have to establish a mechanism to allow for that would assure that they're doing it appropriately, right? And it includes audits as well, if needed. And last but not least, it provides language that requires local governments to not discriminate against this product type when it comes to zoning ordinances and rules. So basically, if there's a zoning allowance for a multifamily structure in a particular area, if that structure happens to be a modular multifamily structure and you're allowing site-built multifamily structures there, then you need to make sure you also allow the modular product as well, if that makes sense. So why does this all matter? Some of this I've alluded to earlier, but I'll go into more specificity. First and foremost, we're talking about a product type that has a lot of potential for great economies of scale, right? And so if we have to do, not by we, I mean the industry, has to produce products that are specific to an address location, right? That really gums up the system, if you will, that assembly line, right, in that plant. If they can deploy multiple units to a region and they all meet the same codes versus being address specific, which is the current system that we have, we feel very confident we can produce a lot more product. So that's number one. That's the number one goal of this whole bill. I mentioned the closer collaboration with local governments on the enforcement to ensure that these continue to be safe products, right? And then, of course, simplifying regulations. Right now, there are instances that we've been seeing where there's double regulation. So the statewide program regulates, and some local governments, not understanding the statewide program, are also replicating some of that regulation, either through plan reviews or inspections, not through the state program, to their own codes, etc. So this really helps streamline that and ensure that folks are not getting double regulated. Nobody wants to be double regulated, right? And then, of course, we think it encourages innovative construction. We are very bullish on modular as being a form of that. The governor himself is as well. The Office of Economic Development has, in international trade, OEDIT, has a program to fund modular production and to increase the capacity in our state. Right now, we've made a lot of gains in the last 4 to 5 years in producing more products in our state than we have in the past. We were 90+% reliant on product coming from other states and even other countries, and have now cut that reliance down in half. So we've made tremendous gains, but we really think this bill will help open it up even further and potentially get us to a place where Colorado is actually leading in modular construction in the state versus having to import so much of that product. As you can imagine, if we are transporting all that product from out of state, that adds to the cost. Shipping is not easy, and navigating between states, and of course, it's already hard enough across our geographically diverse state. So we think we'll bring the cost down as well. And then the last item is what I mentioned earlier about the zoning requirements. We think this will provide a fairer treatment of this product, which is built to the same construction standards as a site built, just through the statewide program versus each individual municipality and county. So the good stuff. What is the status of this bill? I teased it earlier. It passed through the Senate. That's where it's introduced. That's why it's SB 25-2. And of course, it had a very low number, which means it had a high import to the executive and legislative branch. This is a bill that the governor's office is very much involved in addition to us. It is currently with the House, so the second chamber. I have some great news to share this morning. I was listening to the Appropriations Committee, and it passed through Appropriations this morning. It's actually going to the floor, the House floor today as well. There will be 3 rounds on the House. Because there were amendments that were made through the House that were, of course, not considered at the Senate, they're going to have to review those amendments as well. If they agree, then the bill is good to go, and we'll get through the General Assembly and on to the governor for his consideration. I'm confident he will sign it. As I mentioned, the governor's office is very much in support of this bill. It does have a safety clause, so as soon as he signs it, it will go in effect, and we will begin in earnest our implementation efforts. And don't forget, we have to get this all done by July 1st of 2026. It all has to be effective then. So a lot of work has to be done between now and then. For you local governments who are very much interested in this, we'll be reaching out to all local governments. But for those of you very much interested in this and hopefully want to participate more in the process, we would love to hear your feedback about how to make this work. So start thinking now in advance what regional codes would look like. How do we consolidate group like jurisdictions in a way that's more manageable for this industry and, of course, from a regulatory perspective. So I assume there'll be time for questions. I don't know if that's now or later, but I'm happy to stay on to field those questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mo. I think we're going to hold questions for the end. But as you think of them, please add them to the chat. We are, I've seen a few come in there already. So before we move on to Gunnison County, I just wanted to share. So we have, Mo talked about how modular and factory built housing is expanding in Colorado. And so we have this map here that shows where all of that is taking place. So Any of the blue dots are modular factories. Purple, we have 3D printing going on in the state, and orange is the panelized construction companies. So, we really do have a good start on this, and be great to see how it expands moving forward. All right, so up next we have Kathy Pagano and John Cattles from Gunnison County presenting on the Sawtooth community, which in full transparency, the Strong Communities program has supported. And they just had their ribbon cutting ceremony. So I'm very pleased to have them here today.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kathy Pagano. I'm the Assistant County Manager for Community and Economic Development for Gunnison County. And John, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm John Cattles. I'm Assistant County Manager for Operations and Sustainability for Gunnison County.
Yeah, and so we wanted to share our experience with manufactured housing construction in Gunnison. Move to the next slide. Let's see. Okay. So Gunnison County, we owned a 2-acre parcel in the city of Gunnison. It's adjacent to our fairgrounds, but in the city itself. It's been sitting vacant for decades, for a number of years. It served as an overflow parking lot, occasionally for the fairgrounds, and also occasionally accommodated the carnival during the summer. But that was a pretty large parcel that the county owned within the city limits that had curb and gutter infrastructure to it, streets already there. And so in 2021, we looked at developing that parcel, issued RFPs, and ended up partnering with Fading West out of Buena Vista, Colorado, who is a manufacturer who manufactures housing there. We have built 50 units on this 2-acre parcel in the city. We have 12 duplex units, and then those each have a garage behind them with an apartment above. And those are on the apartment and the garages are on that top photo in the slide, and the duplexes are on the bottom photo. And then we also just finished building a 32-unit apartment building that has studio, 1-bedroom, 2 and 3-bedroom, or 2-bedroom units, no 3-bedroom units in that one. All of those units meet the 2021 energy code. They're all electric. They have air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, and solar. And so we're going to talk more about that. But when we did the RFP and received submittals, we did receive applications or proposals from a number of folks that would do site-built construction and stick-built construction on site. And then we also received a proposal from Fading West, and we had just been getting to know them. They'd done some work in Buena Vista. We were familiar, had some familiarity with their team, and so we're really interested in their product. So John's going to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so when we were trying to evaluate which way to go with site-built construction or modular, we were really thinking about the cost benefit of that choice, and then the quality. So these are the things we've realized through this project. Benefits of manufactured housing is a shorter construction timeline. We have a very short construction season in the mountains, as I'm sure a lot of people on this call understand, and so that accelerated timeline is really a big deal. So the 32-unit apartment complex was completed in about 10 months, and that even went through a pretty hard winter we just had. So I think in the future we could probably make that even faster. The construction quality is really high quality. We've visited the factory. We've seen our units in every stage of production, and now after a year with the first round, we've seen that the livability and the quality is quite high, at least as good as site built, if not better in a lot of ways. Projects are cost effective. We're able to build these projects for in the mid $300 a square foot range. The apartment complex came in just under $340 a square foot, all in costs. So those are pretty good costs. We had bids for site built that were comparable. So modular isn't a way to save money necessarily on construction costs, but it is very competitive even with the lowest bids we're getting from site built. One thing that we really appreciate is the limited need for multiple subs, especially our skilled trades like plumbers and electricians. It's a place that we have a really tight labor market in our community, and having a lot of that work done offsite makes it achievable for local subs to actually come do the work. If we were trying to do this scale site built, we would probably have to bring people in from out of town at a higher cost. Um, one thing that on the cost side that we do appreciate, I think I skipped over, was there's a really reduced cost escalation risk. Once you make your commitment with the factory, buy and pay for your place in line, essentially, the cost escalation risk is very mitigated. And so in our world, that's a big deal, especially as you're trying to get financing and understand your all-in costs. Um, these units have proven to be really energy efficient. And we've been happy with our design options with these. Now, some of the cons are there are design constraints. You don't get to design from a clean sheet of paper necessarily, but we've found that we can work within those constraints and come up with something that we like. Another con, if you're financing a project like this, there's a lot of early expenses for capacity reservations and deposits with the factory. And so, depending on your financing model, that could mean early costs starting to, accrue interest early in the project life cycle. And those can be pretty substantial, like, up to 30% of the overall cost can go out in the first months, just to pay for those reservations in the site.
And so we also want to talk about just the zoning of the parcel. The parcel was in the city of Gunnison. We actually had split zoning on the 2 acres. Part of it was zoned R2, and then the other part was zoned industrial. And so on the first phase, we did just stick with that R2 zoning. We felt like that would be a good complement to the existing neighborhood. The existing neighborhood has some single family, but they're actually platted as townhomes, and then there's some apartments in the back, and there's a little bit of multifamily, but it's pretty low density overall, but not just straight single family. So we thought the duplexes and accessory units would be a good introduction to the neighborhood before we pursued the rezoning just a little bit to the south there on the parcel. So we did those first units under R2, and then we worked with the city of Gunnison to rezone the remainder of the parcel, which was zoned industrial, to R3. R3 generally surrounded the rest of the property, and so it made sense. And so the city staff supported us in that. We did have a spirited discussion with some of the planning and zoning commission, who responded as many of you all, I'm sure, have experienced. Comments from the neighbors on worries about too much traffic and too many people, and that there weren't enough existing sidewalks in the area. We were required to put sidewalks in, of course. And some of the P&Z felt that this would be too dense. However, we did ultimately receive that zoning change from the planning and zoning, made a recommendation of approval, and then ultimately the city council did. So we were successful there, and we think it's a good fit for the neighborhood. There's some mobile homes to the south of the structure. Our public safety center is nearby. The fairgrounds are nearby. There's some single families. So it is a variety of uses in the neighborhood. But we think it will be a good, vibrant neighborhood in the end. John?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about energy efficiency. One of the things that we were really concerned about when we started looking at this delivery method was if they could meet the energy codes. At the time, Fading West hadn't built to the 2021 code standard yet, but they were happy to work with us to do so. And so we were able to modify their design slightly to achieve those code standards. So we built to the international the 2021 energy code. On the second phase, we built to the Colorado Electric and Solar Ready codes. The first phase, honestly, we were very close to meeting those codes. They were still in development when we were building this, but I think the only thing we lack is maybe some of the EV charging infrastructure that would be necessary. Um, we did go also. Fading West had also only ever done resistance electric heat units, and we were committed to not using resistance electric heat, as it's basically the least efficient way we could have approached the project. So we worked with them to use air source heat pumps on the duplexes and ADUs. We're very cold climate here. We went nearly 90 days without having one day above freezing this last winter, and most of those days started below 20. And we were able to, heat these buildings pretty efficiently. Obviously, at the very cold, 20 below and lower, we were using the electric backup heat. But what we found is on an hourly basis, we were still using those heat pumps most days, and most of the time, most days. So they were effective and kept the costs low for our residents. On the multifamily building that we just finished, that's a ground source heat pump system, a geothermal system. We've done that on a lot of our office buildings and commercial buildings that the county operates. And so this is the first on a multifamily building, but it went really smoothly. We were very happy with Fading West's ability to modify the plans to accommodate that. It did take, it was the first time they'd done ground source as well. So it did take some meetings with their design team to make sure that that fit. Um, Performance metrics, just so how this has actually turned out. The duplex units, we did have a HERS rater rate those buildings. They scored a HERS of 50. The infiltration rate was incredible. Its infiltration rate is almost half of what's required by code. So very, very tight buildings. And we think we could really improve that HERS score just by speccing some maybe more efficient appliances and stuff here and there that we didn't invest in the first place. So we're quite happy with the efficiency of these.
Wanted to add that one thing that we have done at the county that we think is really important community-wide is that we try to take the lead on some of these things that maybe the general community or contractors are feeling reluctant to do. So I think there was a lot of skepticism around air source heat pumps in our climate. And so we're really trying to take the lead, show people what can be done, share our, wins and losses with them and some of the challenges that we've worked through, so that we can show that it can be done, how to best do it, and, lead the way on that. So we've done that with our organizations buildings with geothermal, and now we're trying to do it with the residential construction also.
Okay. So funding for this project came on right after COVID. We started planning it actually kind of the tail end of the COVID emergency. And so like a lot of governments, we had direct disbursements of ARPA funds, and there was a lot of people wanting that money. There was a lot of staff with plans for how we could spend that money to support the community. And ultimately, our commissioners looked at a lot of the needs in our community and realized that housing is at the center of almost everything that we're struggling with. It won't solve all those problems, but there's a housing connection. So they decided to put all of the ARPA funds we had into this project, which was huge. And so, our capital stack on this project was quite easy with that large investment up front. But, still you have to deliver on budget. So, we had to really maintain discipline with our design team all the way through construction, just making sure that we had cost control. The total cost of this project came in for all 50 units about 17.6 million. We did get a Strong Communities grant for the infrastructure on phase 2, which was really great. The Energy Office also granted us some money to help offset the cost of the solar and heat pumps. And then our board authorized another $1 million from our local marketing district. So that left around $6.5 million that we financed on the project. Because on a project this large with that low of debt, we're able to keep rents low. The majority of our residents are between 70 and 80% AMI. So we're not trying to get to the very low incomes. We There are several projects, LIHTC projects that were recently built, but there's no ladder from the LIHTC up to the next step. So this is what we're trying to achieve. Um, and we do allow rents higher. That's a lot of the reason there is we want people to stay. We want them to stay here long term. And we also want to be able to house our own employees that sometimes make a little higher incomes. Like most governments and businesses in this area, we cannot recruit anybody if we can't hire or offer housing. So that's very important. This project, because of the low debt, it does generate some revenue, which we are using to support our next project that we're breaking ground on Monday. So.
I was just going to add that these, just for people's clarity, these 50 units will all be rental units. So we're going to keep those. That's one strategy that we're doing right now. I think in our community for a number of years, we've been more interested in a for sale product. We have an incredibly tight rental market. The vacancy rate's less than 1%. The quality of product, particularly in and around the city of Gunnison, is pretty poor. And so this is we think a good step and a necessary or something that's needed in our community. The other thing that I just wanted to add that John touched on was just the discipline of our board around funding these projects. So many of us work for elected officials and there's so many needs in our communities, but as John said, the board really identified and they have housing as one of their top priorities in their strategic plan, but their discipline around maintaining that funding specifically for housing really helped us be successful here. We could have certainly spread that ARPA money around and give 30,000 here, 100,000 there, and that could have been helpful in ways, but it really diffuses the impact of that money. And we felt like this was a really impactful way to use the money. And we're really seeing that come to fruition in the community. I was telling Lisa at the beginning, we did the ribbon cutting for phase 2 last week, and we invited the residents who are going to live in the building to come to the ribbon cutting. They hadn't been there yet because it'd been under construction. And so just to hear people's stories, I was teary all afternoon, to hear people's stories of what they were going through and what their current circumstances were. I talked to one young woman who works at Safeway, also works in early childhood. She wants to get a degree in early childhood. She lives in a mobile home currently with 6 other people, and she qualified for a studio unit. So it felt really impactful, and like we could see the work that we were doing had a meaning in the community. So that was a great day, but that discipline of the board and of our organization really helps drive that impact home. And so I think that's all of our slides. Let's see if I can change it, but happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much to all of our presenters. We do have some questions that have come up in the comments, and I know Mo has started answering some of them, but maybe for everybody, if you could talk about the energy codes and fire codes and how that is being addressed with the new legislation.
Yeah, absolutely. And great questions from MJ. Good to see you again. The energy code is actually not something that's diverted by statute to local governments. That is something that's been in our wheelhouse from the outset of this program. But like local governments, impacted by 1362, which is the bill that was passed during the 2022 General Assembly, which requires our program, as well as all local governments, to upgrade the energy code requirements, if you will, to either the 2021 or the 2024 IECC. And of course, adopt and it was mentioned earlier by John, adopt the electric ready and solar ready requirements that were adopted by the Energy Code Board last year. The difference being the statewide program was required to adopt them sooner than local governments. And we did that, and they've been in effect, since January 1st of this year. And then, of course, when it comes to the model low carbon and energy code requirements that the Energy Code Board is currently working on. By the way, I sit on the Energy Code Board. We'll have to adopt those by 2030, if memory serves me right, January 1st, 2030. That work should be done here in the near future, and I'm sure some of you are following that very closely. So ahead of energy code, but not something that's deferred to locals. That stays with the statewide program. But of course, as John mentioned, if a manufacturer wants to do something different on energy code requirement because they've been asked to, that's up to them, but they're not required to do that. They're required to actually meet our requirements, not local government's requirements in that regard. So I hope that makes sense. With regard to fire code, there's confusion about that. The only thing that's deferred in statute is wildfire risk. So we're working very closely with the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board on its work and how that implicates modular. So that's one aspect of it. But the specific question was about fire suppression systems. And that's not something that is deferred to locals through statute, but it is something historically our program did because it just made sense for us to do it that way. But of course, as you can imagine, that has resulted in many different requirements. Some states, some jurisdictions require, some don't. Some require it, but don't really regulate it. So it's created an interesting landscape for manufacturers to navigate as well as ourselves. So that is something that will be part of this consolidated effort approach through 002, even though it's not an item specific. It is actually an item now specifically named in 002, but not something that was deferred by statute, but now will be something on the table as part of the discussions for this consolidated effort. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Happy to answer any more questions. And just so you know, the other good news I forgot to share earlier is CCAT was the first supporter of an organization representing local governments. They're in support of the bill. CCI recently is now in a support position as well. And CML, as of this morning, is potentially in support. I'm not quite clear on that, but are definitely at least neutral. They were in an amend position. We just agreed to amendments actually last night, this morning. That got them off the amend position. So really happy and excited about the local government support in moving this forward. Looking forward to implementing with all of you.
Great. Thank you, Mo. Excuse me. Now we have a question from Chris Ottinger from Montrose for Kathy and John. Did you finance the geothermal or did you get a grant to do it? You could maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the geothermal was included in the overall cost. So what we've found is the cost to build geothermal once you're inside the building, so excluding the loop field, is pretty much apples to apples with a similar quality HVAC system based on combustion fuels. The loop field itself on this building cost us, I think it was $180,000. So in the big scheme of things, that was an easy cost for us to absorb into the financing package. So yeah, it's all included.
Thank you. And then Nicole Schaefer from Granby was asking about deed restrictions. So they are working to deed restrict their factory-built homes. So especially related to the for sale units, are there key considerations for the deed restrictions specific to modular, triplex, and duplex units that could more easily pave the way for homeowner mortgages?
We aren't deed restricting our units because we're holding them as rentals. So they're restricted by policy, not by a restriction, since we're not selling them. So I don't have a real answer for that, but I can't imagine why there'd be a difference between this and a stick-built home at the end of the day.
Great. And then there was a question about access for Sawtooth community. So I having visited the site, I do know that it is in town. And Kathy noted here that it is 5 blocks from the regional bus service stop. I don't know if either of you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, the residents were concerned as often as the case when more housing goes in about more traffic in their neighborhood, just more cars, more people, all those. But the property is pretty much smack in the city in the middle of the Gunnison. It's 7-minute walk from downtown Gunnison. It's 5 blocks from the bus stop, the pre-bus stop, and Safeway. So it's right all in the middle of everything.
Mhm.
which
Thank
is a
you.
great place for more housing.
Yes. Um, and that was one of the key considerations for the Strong Communities program as well, was financing projects that were in infill locations. And then, so Chris Spelke or Spelk, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, is curious to know if the Gunnison Valley Regional Housing Authority has looked into using any of the new Inflation Reduction Act's Clean Energy Investment Tax Credit Program to help finance any of your sustainability, solar, geothermal improvements.
Yeah, so the county, we work with the housing authority to manage our units, but the county owns all these. And yeah, we have, in fact, on phase one, we've applied for, we haven't received yet, our tax credits for the installation of the solar arrays. And on the second phase, we plan to do the same for the geothermal and the solar array there. We did not meet the requirements for the Zero Energy Ready Code tax rebates on this project. We are doing that for the one we're breaking ground on next week. But those are the IRA benefits that we have utilized, and just given the current climate and threats to those, we aren't building those into our pro forma. So if we get those credits, it's good, and we can redeploy that cash, but we are not counting on that. We would feel like that would not be a wise decision at this point.
Great, thank you. Here, this is another question for Mo. Are there any measures to prevent HOAs from discriminating against factory built versus site built?
Excellent question. 002 does not address that.
Okay.
It is something that has been raised as an issue multiple times, but it's not something contemplated in this particular legislative effort. So if somebody's interested in addressing it, by all means, run a separate bill to do so. But for now, it's something that's really left up to local communities to address.
All right. All right, and then a question from Brandon Howes for Kathy and John. What did you use for the interior ventilation? ERVs, HRVs, local exhaust?
Yeah. This question's in the weeds, and I love being in the weeds. That's where the money is, by the way. So yeah, it's a really good question. This is where you can start spending a lot of money. How do you meet code requirements with your mechanical systems, all your systems, and do it cost effectively? On this project, we chose to put every unit has a small ERV. It's a Panasonic unit that's just dropped into a little piece of drop ceiling near the exterior wall, so we have quick access. And
John, do you think for those of us who don't know, could you explain what ERVs and
yeah,
HRVs are?
yeah, energy recovery ventilator. So code requires us to ventilate continuously at a certain rate, especially when we're building very tight homes. And so you want to recover some of the energy from the exhausted air. And so these units can recover, you know, 60 to 80% of the energy, depending on how efficient the unit is. And they can get very complex on large buildings. You can build very complex systems. We found a way to use an off-the-shelf system that's very simple and install it in these units.
Thank you. And then I see that MJ added a little bit more to the deed restriction conversation, that Erie is doing both and they don't have any differences. So thank you for sharing that, MJ. I think we might have time for maybe one or two questions if anybody else has anything. Going once, going
I
twice.
have a quick
Yeah.
question. So for the Gunnison folks, as you see this new legislation in this sort of state level with, regional approach to review and approval and the third party partnerships and everything, how do you see that being different from the experience you went through as a local government, getting your project approved, permitted, et cetera? How do you see how would this change for you?
I don't know that it'll change for us, and maybe we're the exception, but we had a very easy working relationship with the city, and the process worked fairly smoothly with the state inspections and the city inspections on our project. So, Kathy, did you?
Yeah, I would say the same, and I think that's been true in the county and the city for a number of years. I think one of the challenges, Mo, I'm sure you are aware of this, is just the state inspectors doing those inspections and the timeliness of those. I understood from Vading West that there were some challenges around those timeframes. So perhaps that may be unrelated to the legislation entirely and just capacity. But I think from Vading West perspective, that was sometimes a challenge. Am I recalling that right, John? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned we want to work more closely with local building departments for them to conduct those inspections on our behalf. So if there's an opportunity to chat with your local building department about that, would love to have that conversation. Some local governments are very involved in that process, including inspecting installations. So not just the structure themselves, but they're actually, the set and stitching, right? And the connections that are done on site there. We have several jurisdictions that are called participating jurisdictions that do that, but it's really not that many in the grand scheme of things. So we'd love to see that number increase. So our inspectors aren't doing it. But of course, on the installation side, by statute, we also have certified independent inspectors that could do that work. So I don't know where Fading West was with that particular project and why they were relying on the state inspectors. But there are other options, local government and also certified independent inspectors. And so I'd be more than happy to connect with Fading West about their particular model, and maybe they're not thinking about those other options. And then, of course, there's also all the site work that's done to complete a structure. More and more, we're seeing less complete products getting shipped down the road, right? We're seeing more of them coming out in pieces and getting done on site. That's still through our program. We call it on-site completion work. And we have some local governments, and we have a list that we provide to local governments and say, these are items that still need to be done on site through our program. Do you want to inspect them on our behalf, or do you defer them to us? And if deferred to us, then we can talk to the manufacturer about utilizing a third party to do that as well. We love to see more local governments take that responsibility on. Once again, if they feel comfortable and they have the resources to do so. And if they do, they can charge for that work as well, versus us charging for it and our three inspectors trying to get to it when they're covering the whole state.
Yeah, and I'd say our experience was that our partner, Fading West, it evolved. So on phase one, they were using a state inspector. By phase two, they had the third party in place. And then we brought nearly complete units in phase one. On phase two, they're mostly complete, but we did, as we are going through the planning process, we realized we could do some of the on-site work more efficiently. So most of that was just drywall kind of finishes that we realized on the first phase we were redoing a lot of that work. It was cracking during the installation process. And so what I've found, at least with our partner, is there's a lot of flexibility in modular construction, and we were able to adapt from just one phase to the next.
Great. And we have another question here by Joanna. What organization are the private inspectors certified by? I think that's a question from Mo.
Us. We do the certifying. All manufacturers that produce these products for deployment in Colorado have to come and be registered through our program. Anyone that's inspecting on our behalf has to be trained and certified through our program, especially on the installation side of things. Anyone that's selling modular homes, the residential side, not multifamily structures, has to be registered through our program. And of course, all those other independent inspectors that we're talking about have to be registered through our program. So it's actually a pretty robust regulatory process for this industry. Great question.
All right. We have a question from MJ. Who does what phase of inspection affect warranty issues? Does that make sense? So who's doing each phase and how that affects warranties?
I'm not sure about the impact on warranty, but ultimately, we have to certify the construction of a modular structure and its installation. And as mentioned, we work with a variety of parties to help us with that. But at the end of the day, you'll see a state seal on it. Two separate state seals, one for the construction of the structure, and one for its installation. So you need to see two different seals. Once you've got those two seals, you're good to go. And of course, it's still up to the local government to actually CO it to allow occupancy, right? So there's that dance as well. And of course, in some local instances, the DORA's Electric and Plumbing Board has to sign off on the utilities before anything happens, right? If it's not deferred to local government. So all those parties have to work together and coordinate together to ensure that that structure is ready to go. And that's where it gets complicated sometimes. And we really are very hopeful that 002 will establish better coordination and collaboration between all the parties to ensure that happens effectively. Now, it doesn't mean things don't get missed, right? Nothing is a perfect system. And so if there is an issue with the structure, the construction of the structure or its installation, those complaints will be fielded by us. And we'll be working with, other parties as needed to determine what happened. Is it a code issue? How did it get missed? How do we ensure it doesn't happen again? Along with, of course, fixing that specific issue to make sure that structure is safe and compliant.
All right, and then one last question in a minute or less is the idea of an on-site factory. Sorry, I lost it. On-site factory module for specialty work like plumbing, electrical, HVAC, etc., getting any traction?
Guess I'm not quite following the question. Could that person
Lori
unmute
Glover,
legally?
do you want to unmute and
Yeah,
press
I'm blanking Rodriguez, the famous person who is very successful at designing affordable housing and has suggested that the design include everything that is from the professional into a single part of the modular, and therefore to have that to be built on site on it in as an alternative to doing it in the factory.
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the individual's work and thoughts on the subject. I'd love to hear more, though.
Thank you.
All right, that is all of our time for today. So thank you all once again for sticking with us through a whole year of these sessions. We'll look forward to seeing you next month on May 15th for our roundtable on fast tracks. And then on June 19th for a session on ADUs. We will be posting the recording of this session on the website and as well as the presentations. And we will send an email out probably next week with all of that information once it is live. So once again, thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you next month. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Everyone,
Have a good one.
thanks.